What's up, guys? We are at the point of the season where we have Saturday football, NFL, that is, and we have a three-game slate on Saturday, including a matchup that I think should put up a lot of points, and I'll get into it after this. There is a ton of value in current underdog playoff best ball ADP. Elite offenses like the Bills are easy to stack. Take advantage of uncertainty and start drafting now. Use the promo code SEEK for up to a $100 match on your first deposit, and subscribe to Heat Seeker Sports on YouTube for underdog strategy and drafting shows. What's up, guys? Simon Edwards at PumaCom with Heat Seeker Sports, and you're watching the Stack Show. And in a special Stack Show, we have a three-game slate, and there is a perfect game to stack this week. Before we get into all that, make sure to sign up for Underdog. We got playoff best ball that has just started, and there are a lot of values on there for teams that are on the bubble of making the playoffs. Basically, we got a team like Buffalo that is on the bubble. A lot of people don't think that they can get in, and it is affecting their ADP. You can get a tremendous value on Buffalo right now if you believe that they can make it to the playoffs. And if you use the promo code SEEK on your first deposit, Underdog is going to do $100 up to $100 deposit match. So if you deposit $100, you get $100 from Underdog, and that gives you 8 entries into that contest. Make sure you hit like on this video. I'm looking for 15 likes to put out a shorter video. And make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel because, like I said, with all that Underdog content coming up starting next week, you're going to want to be getting alerts for when these shows are coming up on YouTube. And you do that by subscribing to the channel and setting the alerts. So now let's get into this three-game slate. If you look at my content, I've put up 2 shows already for showdowns. I put up the show for the first game and the second game, Cincinnati game and the Indianapolis game. So make sure to check out my YouTube page to get access to those shows specifically focused on showdowns. For this show, though, I am focused on the 3-game slate. So we're going to do a breakdown of this slate. And there are 3 interesting games. The showdowns that I've done already, Minnesota versus Cincinnati and Pittsburgh versus Indy. But I've just done my digging into Denver versus Detroit, and I have found my favorite game on the slate. And it will be a popular one, but I think that I have a way that we can build our lineups to get a little bit different. First, let's go through the player pool. For quarterbacks, we got Jared Goff, who has been struggling recently, but he's been playing on the road the last 2 weeks. Last time he was at home, he scored 24 points against Green Bay. He only put up 16 points against Chicago, but then he put up 24 points on the road versus the Chargers. So now he's at home again, gets to play indoors in an environment that he's comfortable in. He's got a tough defense that he's playing, though, in Denver, who has been lights out lately. Denver has been playing really well lately, and Jared Goff is going to have to try to put up points against them. He is the second highest owned guy on the slate as far as quarterbacks, and I'm not really a fan of Jared Goff this week. I do like Russell Wilson, though. I like Russell Wilson's matchup, and Russell Wilson has been having one of the better seasons of his career. He has not put up a ton of fantasy points recently. He is getting 18 fantasy points a lot, though, and I think 18 DraftKings points is what we're going to need from a quarterback this week because we're looking at a lot of backups for the remainder of the quarterbacks. We got Browning, who has been impressive his last couple weeks, but now he's running into a very difficult defense in Minnesota that blitzes a lot. And I don't know if Jake Browning is going to be able to make it through all that pressure. He is playing at home, though, and he has been playing well, and he's got the weapons. But Minnesota is a defense that is a very tough defense to be facing. Then we got Gardner Minshew. Minshew has a few games where he has done well. Well, actually, 2 games. He scored 34 points against Cleveland, and then he scored 22 points against Tennessee recently. But Gardner Minshew is in a matchup against Pittsburgh. that should be, like kind of a defensive matchup, and Pittsburgh is only giving up 14 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. I am not a fan of Gardner Minshew this week, and I probably won't have a lot of exposure to him. Trubisky is the other guy. Trubisky is another backup. Trubisky put up 21.6 points against New England last week, but he is in the same matchup that Gardner Minshew is, because the Colts are giving up the exact same amount of quarterback DraftKings points a game and 14 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. And I think this is going to be a more run-heavy game, and I laid that all out in my showdown show, so you're going to want to check that out. And then we got Nick Mullins. Mullins has the second best matchup on the slate. We haven't seen much out of Mullins since he was with San Francisco, and he started a few game stretch there when Jimmy G went out. But Mullins was pretty good in the first couple games of that stretch, and he has that mystery box situation going on this week where we don't know, and the defenses don't really know what he's going to look like in the system. So Nick Mullins definitely has I definitely have some interest in Nick Mullins. I probably will be mainly interested in Mullins and in Russell Wilson this week. So those are my two primary quarterbacks this week. If we move on to the running back position, we got Jahmyr Gibbs. Gibbs has a good matchup against Denver. Gibbs and Montgomery have good matchups against Denver. Denver is one of the worst teams in the league against the running backs. They have only been giving up 21.5 DraftKings points a game since week 6, so they've been a little bit better, but they're still vulnerable to that running back position, and they are facing a offense that is heavy on the run in Detroit, and Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery are both going to be in play. It's been a pretty split backfield. We have not really seen a big game out of Montgomery since Green Bay, where he scored 15 DraftKings points, and even that's not that big, but on the 3-game slate, 15 DraftKings points will go a long way for the running back position. Let's look at Gibbs. Gibbs has been more consistent. He's had a few 20-point games. He's basically taken over as the upside guy in this backfield. I like Gibbs better than I like Montgomery. Joe Mixon is in a rough spot as far as a matchup. Minnesota's been pretty good against the run, and they are only allowing 18.8 DraftKings points a game, which is among the best in the league since week 6. So I am probably going to have very little exposure to Joe Mixon. David Montgomery I covered. Zach Moss, he is going to be popular this week. I'm not really, I don't really get it, because Pittsburgh has, they've been giving up 22.7 DraftKings points a game since week 6 to the running back position, and that's a very middling amount of points to be giving up. I much prefer Pittsburgh's running back matchups. They have a much better matchup against Indy, who is giving up 31.7 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. And we can see Jaylen Warren has been a while since he had that stretch of games where he was scoring 20 DraftKings points a game. He hasn't scored double digits in 3 weeks. He's had a couple easy matchups in that stretch, so not really sure what's going on with Jaylen Warren. Najee Harris has been very similar. They haven't been getting it going with the run game. Maybe it's got something to do with Trubisky. I don't know, but I do like their matchup this week. They have a huge rebound spot this week in their matchup against Indy. Javonte Williams, I like his matchup too. I like that Detroit is giving up a decent amount of passing yards, receiving yards to these running backs. They are giving up the 7th most receiving yards per game, with 44 yards a game to the running back position. And that is perfect for Javonte Williams, because look at the targets he's been getting. 4 targets last week, 3 targets the week before that, 6 targets the week before that. Russ Wilson likes to target these running backs, and Javonte Williams is set up for a nice game. Despite a tough general running matchup for him, Detroit is giving up only 20 DraftKings points a game to the running back position, but I think this is a matchup that Javonte Williams can benefit from with the pass game. Let's see. We also got Ty Chandler, who is looking like the starter with Alexander Mattison being ruled out. And his matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals is another good one. Bengals are giving up 22 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. So Ty Chandler has a decent matchup against Cincy, and he's another guy that'll probably go a little bit overlooked. So let's see. Other running backs I might have interest in are Chase Brown. I recommended him last week on last week's show, sub 2% ownership, and he ended up scoring 19.5 DraftKings points. What I noticed about Chase Brown the previous week, he was on a showdown slate, and that's what I focus on. And I noticed some beat writers were talking him up, and I had a little exposure in that showdown game. And I recognized that he was getting a lot of work early on in the game, which surprised me. And it made me go all in on him on his first week after that showdown game, which was last week, where he put up 19.5 DraftKings points. Recommended him on the show, and he went off. And I do kind of like him this week, but he's 4,800. So he's still pretty cheap, but I don't think that we're going to necessarily need to go there, but he's a salary relief option at 4,800. And I do not mind Chase Brown this week in this Minnesota matchup. Minnesota is giving up, only that 18.8 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. So, Chase Brown is more of a guy to use if you need salary relief. It's not a great matchup. Other than that, not many running backs that I see that I have interest in. If we go to the wide receiver position, I like Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson, pretty much matchup proof, and he has a good matchup on top of that, with Cincinnati giving up 17 DraftKings points a game to the wide receiver, to wideouts specifically. And that pairs nicely with the 21.3 points a game that they are giving up to the quarterback position. And that's why I like Nick Mullins this week. He has the matchup where the defense is giving up the most points since week 6 to the quarterback position with 21.3. Next up is Russ Wilson with that 20.9 DraftKings points a game. So Nick Mullins, I don't hate starting him if you need the salary relief, or if you want to try to get a little bit different. There's not going to be a lot of Nick Mullins lineups this week. And all these backups this week, and the tough matchup that Russ might, he doesn't have a tough matchup, but he has a matchup where Russ Wilson has not put up over 20 DraftKings points in a while. I think that Nick Mullins could potentially score the same amount as Russ this week, and he's going to be at a discount. So stacking him with Justin Jefferson is a way to go this week for sure. And I like that. I like that stack. And you can even throw Hawkinson into that mix too, because the Bengals are giving up 17 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position. But I'll get into that when I hit the tight ends. I'm not a huge fan of Amon-Ra St. Brown, because Denver has been pretty good against these receivers, even the slot receivers. And Amon-Ra, he's had a pretty good season. He's had a lot of 30-point weeks in there. But when the matchup is bad, Amon-Ra has struggled a little bit, and this is not the best matchup. And we are looking at a team in Detroit, in Denver, that is only giving up 14.9 DraftKings points a game to the slot position, which is among the league worst, and also 10.6 to the wideouts. So it's not a good matchup for wideouts. I much prefer the running backs and the tight end on the Detroit side. But, if Amon-Ra, on top of that, Amon-Ra has huge ownership. So Amon-Ra, one of the most popular plays on the board, and I don't like his matchup. I think there are ways on the Detroit offense that we can get different. So I might not play much of Amon-Ra. I would much rather play a cheaper Jamar Chase even though Jamar Chase's matchup is not that great, but he's got a better matchup than Amon-Ra, with Minnesota giving up 15.6 DraftKings points a game to the wideout position. So I like Jamar Chase this week, and I don't think he's going to be highly owned. He's probably going to be like the lower owned of the studs, but Jamar Chase can obviously break any slate, and he's going to be in a good spot to do that this week. Let's look at his ownership. I'm looking at a projected ownership of 25%. You compare that with 40+% for Pittman, Jefferson, and Amon-Ra, and you have a recipe for a good pivot in Jamar Chase. Michael Pittman is going to be getting a ton of volume, supposedly tomorrow. He is playing against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has been a tough matchup, though. Pittsburgh is giving up, they're giving up only 7 DraftKings points a game to those wideouts. So I do not like that matchup for Michael Pittman, but he's going to get volume. But he is high owned, and it's a situation where I would rather use Jamar Chase than Pittman. I would rather use Jamar Chase than Amon-Ra. So next up, we have Courtland Sutton. Sutton's another guy that I like. I like the matchup. I like that Detroit, they're giving up 15 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. They're giving up a lot of explosive plays to wideouts, and Russ Wilson should be able to cook this week with those deep balls to Courtland Sutton. And, he probably throw a lot of passes to Javonte Williams. That gives us an opportunity to get a little different with the Denver stack. I don't like T. Higgins this week, but he is another guy that could break the slate, if given the opportunity. And he is in that same matchup with that 15.6 DraftKings points a game to the wideouts. Jordan Addison, not too much interest in Addison. Let's see what his matchup is. Let's see, Minnesota. Actually, I take that back. I do have interest in Jordan Addison. He's another guy that we could stack in that in those Mullins stacks with the 17.1 DraftKings points a game that Minnesota is getting from Cincinnati. Addison hasn't done anything in a few weeks, but that was with Joshua Dobbs. And now that he has Mullins throwing to him, maybe he'll get a little bit more catchable targets. You see, versus Chicago, like Addison with Justin Jefferson out, got 10 targets. He got 6 targets. He got 7 and 7 targets. It might be something where like Addison needs Jefferson to be in the game to take away attention, because Addison's the type of receiver that if you push him around a little bit, he has a little bit more trouble. But if he's not the primary focus of the defense in the secondary, then I bet you Addison could have a better game that we've seen recently. So keep Addison in your player pool, especially in those Mullins stacks. Let's see. Deontay Johnson let's see his matchup. Deontay Johnson, I did like these wideouts in the showdown show, but with Indy only giving up 13 DraftKings points a game to wideouts, like I'm not such a fan of it in the overall slate. I think that I prefer the running game of Pittsburgh, and I don't trust necessarily like Mitch Trubisky to give these guys the points that they need to show up in a 3-game slate. So maybe I'm off of Deontay Johnson and George Pickens a little bit, but they do have the upside to beat that salary, the 5,200 and 4,800 for Johnson and Pickens. Pickens has not done much recently, but the coach speak seems to indicate that they want to use him more, and they're going to need to use him more if they want to be a contender for the playoffs. So I would not be surprised if Johnson or Pickens has a good game. I'll keep them in my player pool, but I'm not going to have a ton of exposure to them. Jerry Jeudy, he's been horrible this year, and he's kind of he just has not looked good at all. He had that incident with Steve Smith where he made a fool out of himself on national TV, and yeah, Jerry Jeudy as he's not been very good at all. I was reading that the coaching staff, pushed Russell Wilson to get him the ball more, and then he gave him an opportunity last week, and Russell Wilson gave Jerry Jeudy a lot of targets last week, and he only caught 2 of them. So Jerry Jeudy, he has been off this year. He has looked really bad, and even when he's gotten the opportunity, he hasn't delivered. Josh Downs is someone I like in this price range with Indy facing off against Pittsburgh. The biggest vulnerability from Pittsburgh's defense is to those slot receivers, which is where Downs gets 83% of his snaps, and Pittsburgh is giving up 19 DraftKings points a game to the slot. So I liked Downs in my player pool this week. He hasn't had a big week in a while, but this could be, like a week for him to do something. Other than that, if we look down cheaper, upside, if we're looking for Jameson Williams, Jameson Williams has the upside. He's in a tough matchup, but he is in a game that I'm going to be stacking, so I'll have a little bit of exposure to him. Other than that, I think that's about it for guys that I'll consider for the running back or the wide receiver position. Moving on to tight end, Laporta is in a great matchup against Denver, and he fits in those game stacks perfectly. And he had a weak last week with only 5 DraftKings points, but before that he scored 32 and 18, and he's been on a tear this year. He's been, if you drafted him in best ball, you're very happy. And make sure to make that deposit on Underdog so you can do playoff best ball and use that promo code SEEK. You're using the promo code SEEK to get $100 match on your first deposit. So make sure to use that code SEEK and you get up to $100 match on your first deposit on Underdog. TJ Hawkinson, I also like. Another guy with a good matchup. Hawkinson and Laporta have about as good matchups as you can get for the tight end position this week. And Hawkinson's matchup, the Cincinnati's giving up 17.2 DraftKings points a game to the tight end. Laporta's matchup, the Broncos are giving up 16 DraftKings points a game to the tight end. So those are pretty much the 2 top matchups for tight ends, and these are 2 of the top tight ends. So I don't hate 2 tight end builds this week, given those matchups. Pat Freiermuth, he also has a decent matchup. Pat Freiermuth is a guy that, all the tight ends pretty much have good matchups except for Cincinnati's tight ends and Denver's tight ends, but those aren't tight ends that you're really going to target anyways. Every single one of these tight ends, even Indy's tight ends have a good matchup, but I'm not really into the Indy tight ends. But if you need the salary relief and you don't want to go with one of these higher price tight ends, then you have the opportunity to take one of those Indy tight ends. Let's take a look at them. Pat Freiermuth, like I said, he's got a good matchup. He has not done much this year. He's only had 2 weeks over 10 DraftKings points. I think I prefer him in a showdown slate as opposed to this one, but he is a way to pivot for a cheaper salary over those studs with just as good a matchup. Tanner Hudson, not really interested in him this week. I don't think we need to go there. But if we want to go cheap with those tight ends on the Colts, Granson, 4 targets last week, 3 targets the week before that, has not really done much this season. There was a guy, though, on the Colts that I noticed in the showdown breakdown. Let's look at these Colts here. Mallory. Mallory is a guy that has gotten 5 targets last week and 4 targets the week before that, 3 targets the week before that. In this good matchup at 2,500 for his salary, he is a salary relief option. Will Mallory, keep him in your player pool this week. He's been getting opportunity, and he's in a good matchup. So moving on from the tight end position, we'll go to the defense. Now, defense this week, there are a few good options. I think in the Minnesota-Cincinnati game, these defenses are both going to be stepping up this week. I like that the Vikings are only 2,800. I am surprised that the Vikings are only 2,800. I would imagine they're going to be the highest owned defense. I also don't hate the Broncos at 2,700, but I'm going to be stacking that game, so I'll probably stay away from that. Steelers and Colts, both interesting. All these defenses, I like the Bengals, I like the Colts, I like the Steelers, I like the Vikings. Those are going to be my primary four, but I like the Vikings obviously the best with that 2,800 salary. And let's just plug them in now. So let's build a lineup. Before I get into this lineup, just a reminder, sign up on Underdog, use the promo code SEEK, get up to $100 match on your first deposit, and playoff best ball. I'm going to be starting that content this week, and you're going to want to subscribe to the YouTube page and sign up for alerts to get notifications when that content is going up. And there's lots of value in Underdog right now with these teams on the bubble. I'm talking about Buffalo. If you think that Buffalo can make it to the playoffs, then you're getting a hell of a deal on Buffalo right now, and you can stack that team pretty easily as one of your pods. And I'll get into strategy when I do those shows next week. For quarterback, let's put in Russ Wilson. Let's get him in there, and let's stack him with Cortland Sutton. And let's stack him also with, I'm going to stack him with his running back, because I think that Javonte Williams is going to get a lot of targets in this game, and he's going to have a good matchup. As far as wide receivers, I want to get Justin Jefferson in there. He's my favorite expensive guy. Let's get Chase in there too, and just see where that takes us. For tight end, let's get Laporta in there. Let's see. For my other running back, kind of putting myself in a rough spot here. I'm going to put in Gibbs. I'm going to overstack that game. I'm going to have to get rid of Chase or Jefferson. Maybe I'll get rid of Jefferson, but let's get rid of Chase for now. And let's look for a good. Let's go with Hawkinson and the flex. You can't do that. So let's see here where we can find for value in the wide receiver position. I liked Pickens. I talked about. I think Pickens has the most upside of these cheap guys, and Downs. Pickens and Downs are the guys that I think I would like the best. I'm going to go with Pickens though, and that's going to leave me with 3,300 for my flex. So if I scroll down, looking at Tanner Hudson, looking at Mims, Mims I wouldn't hate in this build, just to give Russ a second receiver. Not really liking how that build shapes up. So let's get rid of Jefferson and let's put in Chase. See where that leaves us. That leaves me with 3,800. And if I have 3,800, that puts Josh Reynolds in play. And Josh Reynolds is a guy that gets a lot of red zone work. So I don't mind having him in play. What's his injury situation? Listed as questionable. Showed up on Wednesday due to a back issue. So don't like that. But yeah, I mean, Josh Reynolds, I think, has some upside, though, especially at the price point we're looking for. And he's probably my favorite guy. Pierce, like we've seen upside with Pierce this season. He had 22 points just a couple weeks ago, but that's the only upside we've seen with him. Not really interested in Pierce there. Pat Freiermuth is 3,900. So if we can get, if we can find $100 somewhere, let's get rid of Pickens and let's put in Downs. If we do that, that gives us 4K to play with. That gives us in the flex, that gives us the option of, where is he at? Pat Freiermuth. So I don't hate using Pat Freiermuth, as I said, in the flex. Jameson Williams, he's another option. Pierce is another option, and Reynolds is another option. So if we want to alter this a little bit, let's get rid of Russ Wilson in the captain. In the quarterback, and let's put in Mullins and get that salary relief there. Let's get rid of Chase. Let's put Jefferson back in because we want to stack him with Jefferson. I don't know if I want to overstack that game, but let's get Chase. Let's see if we can get Chase in there. Now that leaves us with okay. So we swap out Laporta, even though I like him. You know what? Let's see what running back situation. What is Warren and Harris? Let's swap out Gibbs for Harris. Let's get Laporta back in there if we can. That leaves us 3K. Let's get rid of Laporta. Let's get Gibbs back in there. Both those guys you can swap out because there's a lot of good matchups on the running back position this week, and there's a lot of good matchups with tight end. Let's get Freiermuth in there though, because he gives us a cheap option. Actually, you know what? Let's give it Hawkinson if we can double stack Mullins. Let's get rid of Sutton. That gives us 4K left per guy. Let's find a cheap receiver here. Let's go with Pickens, like I was talking about earlier. Gives us 3,300 to play with. That puts us in that Mims range again. So gives us options. I think that that cheap receiver is something that we're going to need to find for that final spot. Mims might be one of my not favorite, but one of my preferred guys. He's had 3 targets a few times recently. He hasn't done anything since week 3. He had a couple explosive weeks in a row there, and everybody was questioning why they're not starting Mims. But then, he doesn't do anything for the last 10 weeks or so. So not a huge fan of Mims, but he's an option there. If I wanted to go a little bit different, let's get Gibbs out of there. Let's put in. At this point, we're pretty much fading that Detroit game, which I don't like to do. We only got Williams in there right now, but let's say that maybe that game is a lower scoring game because Denver's defense steps up and Williams is the one that gets all the points in that game. Let's put in a cheap guy. Let's put in Harris, and that gives us 4,900 in the flex. And that leaves us with options like Judy, Josh Downs. I think Downs is a guy I'd prefer. And that way we're basically fading that Denver game, which I don't like necessarily. So maybe we change this up just a little bit here. Let me look and see what we can do. I like Williams. It's going to be tough getting a couple of these studs in here. Maybe we decide to go Laporta instead, and that gives us that exposure to that game. It gives us 4,700 in the flex. We're not double stacking Hawkinson anymore, but double stacking a Nick Mullins team might be playing with fire. But I do think that he's going to have a decent game, and Mullins to Jefferson stacks I don't hate. Allows us to get in Jefferson and Chase. Leaves us with 4,700 in the flex. Gives us a position where we can put like Downs in the flex. Obviously, you want to make sure that your latest game, your latest starter at that position is in the flex. But Downs is an option. Judy would be an option. And I don't like Boyd this week. You'd have Chase No, Chase Brown would not be an option. But that's a way you can go. Let's see, not really any defenses I would go cheaper than the Vikings. So that's a direction. I think you can get a little bit different. I think the optimal is the optimal puts in Fryermuth as the main tight end. I'll build that lineup so you can get an idea of what the optimal is trying to direct us to. They got Browning in there. They got Jalen Warren and Zach Moss as the running backs. Jalen Warren and Zach Moss. I do not get Zach Moss this week, but he's going to be popular. Tyler Boyd and Michael Pittman and Justin Jefferson. They're going for Pittman and Jefferson. I prefer that pivot off of Pittman to Chase. They also got, let's see, Fryermuth in there. Let's put Fryermuth in the tight end position. They got Gibbs in there. Let's see who they got for the defense. Vikings D, just like I had. And then for that final wide receiver position, you can use your imagination. Got Tyler Boyd as an option, Alec Pierce, Jameson Williams, etc. So that's a way that you can go on this 3-game slate. So make sure to check all the news leading into lock. I think that I do like the matchup here for the Broncos. Broncos are my favorite matchup this week because it plays to their strengths. And on the other side, I think there are clear paths for run backs with Laporta. So I'm going to try to get as many Broncos stacks with Laporta run backs and also Gibbs. I like Gibbs in his matchup, but also Montgomery. Montgomery's not bad either. So those 3 guys are my primary run backs on the Lions side. I don't like Amon-Ra's matchup, although he's going to be popular. And I don't hate Minnesota stacks either. I think that's the cheaper way to go if you're looking for salary relief, is get some Nick Mullins exposure in there. I think he's going to be a interesting low-owned pivot for the quarterback, and he's in the best matchup if you're looking at DraftKings points since week 6. So hit like on that video. Get me to 15 likes, and I'll put out a shorter video a little bit closer to lock if I can. And also make sure to subscribe to the YouTube page and use that promo code. Use the promo code SEEK with your first deposit on Underdog. If you're opening a new account, use the promo code SEEK. We're going to be playing playoff best ball together. I'll be helping you out with strategy. Make sure to subscribe to that YouTube page and sign up for alerts to get those alerts when those strategy shows are going up. But make sure to get your money in there. $100 up to $100 deposit match when you use the promo code SEEK on Underdog. Good luck, guys.